Welcome back to our regular weekly podcast. We are back from a 2-week break over the summer period, and I hope everybody's been busy and despite the many challenges that you've faced, that it's been a productive and thriving time for your business. So today we have guest speaker Leon Thompson, our UKHospitality Executive Director for Scotland. Leon took over the role from Willie McLeod back in May, I think, which is just a few months ago, but it does certainly feel like it's been a lot longer, probably because of the sheer amount of things that have been going on. Welcome, Leon.
Great to be here, thanks.
Why don't you start off by telling the listeners a little bit about yourself and how you ended up at UKHospitality Scotland?
Okay, I will, thanks. I started with UKHospitality in May this year, and I joined from Visit Scotland, where I'd been Government and Parliamentary Affairs Manager for a number of years, working for tourism in Scotland, basically making sure that our politicians understood not only the work of Visit Scotland and the importance of that, but also to help them develop a clearer understanding of the importance of tourism to the country, to the economy, to the communities around the country as well. So that was my sort of introduction to the world of tourism, and that brought me into contact with hospitality, and in particular with UKHospitality. So I actually worked quite closely with Willie McLeod, my predecessor, on a number of areas, particularly over the course of the cross-party group on tourism, and would often find myself at a number of meetings with Willie, sort of talking about a lot of the same issues and challenges that were facing the sector, whether it be business rates, whether it be recruitment, and issues which eventually we moved into around COVID as well. So that's my background. In broad terms, it's a policy background, it's a communications background, I have skills in research as well. So I think I've brought all of that together in this role at UKHospitality.
Yeah, and I think you were kind of thrown in at the deep end when you started. There was a lot going on, and you've really just hit the ground running with a lot of those things.
Yes, and I think that was the real sort of advantage of already having been quite close to the world of hospitality and the work of UKHospitality, that I was able to sort of pick up the reins almost immediately, and just start joining meetings with the government, joining meetings with industry reps, getting to know members who I hadn't met before, and understanding the issues that the sector was facing.
Yeah, and what have been the most recent developments in Scotland?
The most recent development really last week with the move towards removal of almost all restrictions, which has felt like a long time coming, and certainly a number of weeks behind England, certainly in terms of actually loosening the restrictions. So as of Monday last week, what that means is that we've got more businesses open, nightclubs can reopen, we've got increased capacity in hospitality venues, particularly pubs, where people can now order at the bar, they can stand and drink. There's no more physical distancing either, so that means that there can be more tables brought into to venues as well. So generally, it's starting to feel that we're going back to sort of a normal situation, but we're not quite there yet. We still have mandatory wearing of face coverings in hospitality venues, which is proving to be a bit of a challenge in terms of actually business owners and workers actually being able to encourage customers to continue to do that, to wear face coverings when they're not either eating, drinking, or dancing. So that's a challenge, and people still need to use the NHS check-in app as well, and it's only hospitality businesses where that's actually a mandatory requirement. So that's something that continued to discuss with the Scottish Government.
Hospitality businesses certainly do seem to have been hit very hard on the restriction side of things.
Absolutely, and I think there are weekly meetings with the Scottish Government to sort of discuss the impact that restrictions have had and are continuing to have on hospitality businesses. But undoubtedly, hospitality has been severely hit, more so than any other sector that I can think of.
And how is UKHospitality working to help get the industry back on track?
So At the moment, continuing to work with the Scottish Government to make sure that they sort of understand the impact of those remaining restrictions and what that actually means for businesses in terms of the challenges that they're continuing to face. The Scottish Government has been very good throughout the pandemic in providing financial assistance and support for hospitality businesses. But now it's about making the case for an ongoing framework of support for businesses. We've got a lot of businesses that are facing unmanageable short-term debt. And that's something that we're discussing with the government at the moment to see how we might actually get some support from the government to help with things like HMRC invoices and so on, so that we can actually sort of lift some of those sort of those immediate financial pressures from businesses. Because we're talking about viable businesses, but the challenge is that with this short-term debt, it might actually cause a number of them to have to close if they can't pay suppliers, they can't pay staff because they're being hit with repayment demands by the tax man, by banks where they've taken out sort of short-term loans, and there's also sort of some issues around rent and things as well. So these are the areas that we're talking to the Scottish Government about at the moment to see if we can get some ongoing support. So it won't be financial support, but if there's some way in which we can get this short-term debt transferred into longer-term debt, then that actually will help businesses come through, because we're now at that sort of final stage. Businesses have done so well to sort of been able to survive and to continue, and we can't really have them fall at the last hurdle.
No, exactly. That would be such a shame to have gone through what is a very stressful time to then, like you said, at that very last hurdle, not quite make it. That would just be like everything has been for nothing, all the support that the government has given so far. It just wouldn't make sense, would it? Though?
And we've got so many great businesses here in Scotland as well that, and they're so important for communities. It's so important for the tourism offer as well, and smaller businesses operating in particularly rural locations. It's vital that they do survive, because when international visitors come back, these are the sorts of businesses that people will want to go to, and these are the businesses that make the holiday experience for so many people.
Exactly. And what have been the key successes in the last 3 months?
So I think working with the Scottish Government, I think we have reached a point where there's a much greater understanding of the importance of hospitality, and we're now seeing that reflected in the new structure of what was the tourism team within the Scottish Government. So it's now the tourism and hospitality team, and we have a dedicated official now sort of leading on hospitality issues. So that's a very positive step forward, because it kind of brings hospitality out of the kind of shadow of tourism and sort of gives it its own standing in that team. And that's all part of the kind of work that's been going on through the hospitality task force as well. So these are the regular meetings with the government to sort of make the case for hospitality. So that's a success. I think engagement with ministers as well. Obviously, we had an election here in Scotland at the start of May, so there's been a lot of engagement already with relevant ministers and cabinet secretaries, and right up to a meeting with the First Minister within I think my first 3 weeks of being in the role. So I would certainly sort of put all those things forward as successes, and that's really provided the opportunity to ensure that the new administration understands the importance of hospitality and what we need from our politicians for the months ahead. So from a sort of policy, public affairs side of things, those have been absolutely kind of key and critical. For me, I think I've spent quite a bit of time trying to build up the profile as well for UK Hospitality Scotland. So a lot more activity on social media than we had before, which has been good. Quite a bit of media exposure, certainly in the press and also on radio and TV as well. So that's, I think, created a lot more standouts for not just the organisation, but also for our members as well, which has been critical just in terms of actually sort of getting the points across, getting the arguments across, welcoming the changes and the developments that have happened and the loosening of restrictions, but also being able to kind of highlight the ongoing challenges as well. That's been absolutely key. As the sector has begun to reopen, we've seen challenges around recruitment, and UK Hospitality Scotland was involved in a campaign that was funded by the Scottish Government to push for recruitment into the sector. So that's a big win. That released £100,000 of Scottish Government funding for a social media campaign aimed principally at a younger audience, encouraging them to come into to roles in hospitality. So it's kind of twofold reason for that. One is obviously to deal with the immediate challenges, but the other is to try and change some of the perceptions out there about what jobs in hospitality mean and involve and so on. So that's been running for the last few weeks, has been successful in terms of reaching the audience and engaging with member businesses as well. And some very positive feedback coming from that. But there's more to be done on that, because we are facing an ongoing and in some places acute recruitment challenge. I've also worked very closely with Food Standards Scotland because they've got quite a lot of work coming down the track, which is going to impact on hospitality businesses potentially. So I've been building closer relationship with them so I can actually understand more about their work, their priorities, and ensure that they actually understand where UK Hospitality Scotland is in the conversations around things like labelling on menus, around calories, fat, salt, sugar levels, and so on, and also on PPDS as well, which is fast approaching us on the 1st of October. So a lot of work with them there to actually sort of make sure that there's guidance available for our member businesses and hospitality businesses more widely. So I mean, I think those are probably the kind of key things which have come through in the first months. But crucially, we're still managing the impact of the pandemic, and still, a big part of the role is actually sort of looking at potential challenges that may emerge over the autumn.
And on the food side of things, is that one of the priorities for UK Hospitality Scotland for the autumn then?
Yeah, so with PPDS coming in on the 1st of October, that's a key challenge to make sure that businesses are aware of the new law and what their obligations are under that law. I think that's kind of got a little bit lost in the pandemic to a certain extent. Food Standards Scotland are now sort of running to try and catch up, really, to sort of get information out into the hands of businesses. The Food Standards Scotland, they published a strategy at the end of May, and then a new corporate plan shortly after that. So they are very much sort of targeting the out-of-home eating area, and they're sort of seeing that as where they want to sort of focus attention right now, and encouraging businesses to label calories and so on their menus. Now, we do have a new minister who's come in for public health, and that minister's yet to decide on sort of what the Scottish Government actually wants to do on these issues. So there's going to be some conversations with the public health minister about the aspirations of Food Standards Scotland and what that would mean for businesses that are still in sort of survival mode, really, and what we don't want are further burdens of time and money and other resources being used for things which ultimately may have no impact anyway.
And are there other priorities that you're going to be looking at going forward?
Yeah, so recruitment will continue. I think that's going to be there for some time. And had a roundtable session with the Skills Minister as well as the Economy Minister a few weeks ago, and they are now engaging with the UK government to look at some of the solutions for some of the recruitment challenges in Scotland. Ultimately, we do have a relatively small population in Scotland, and particularly around population of working age as well. So a lot of businesses certainly benefited from freedom of movement and EU nationals coming to work in Scotland, and that has certainly impacted on the ability of a number of businesses to actually operate fully now that we've left the EU. So recruitment will continue to be a challenge, and working with Skills Development Scotland, Scottish Tourism Alliance, and the hospitality industry in its widest sense, we will be sort of continuing to kind of push for more people to consider careers in hospitality. So that's one key priority for the coming months. The other one as well is to make sure that the Scottish Government continue to kind of lift restrictions, those restrictions that remain in place, which are burdensome to hospitality businesses. And I will be sort of working very closely with the Scottish Government as well, and with their clinicians, to let them know about the potential impact of any further restrictions that may emerge over the autumn and winter period, and the impact that would have on hospitality businesses. Ultimately, it's all about the resilience of the industry, so that's going to be a big focus for the next months as well. So we'll hopefully start to move into sort of proper recovery for businesses, but then actually kind of look at, as a part of that, as to how we actually avoid a devastating impact on the sector again. We've also got the issue of short-term lets as well in Scotland, which has kind of it's rising on the political agenda. The Scottish Government wants to introduce a licensing scheme for short-term lets across Scotland, which we are supportive of, because we've long argued that there needs to be a level playing field for all accommodation providers in Scotland, and we feel that the introduction of this legislation, which should happen this autumn, is beneficial and is fair, and we're making the case to government that they should proceed with their plans to introduce a licensing scheme. So those are some of the priorities for the next month, and I'm sure there'll be other things which will come up as we kind of move through the autumn period.
Yeah, well, there's a lot there already, and a lot I think we could delve into a little deeper and discuss in more detail, which I'm sure that the listeners would want to know about, and exactly what that would mean for their business and how we would be supporting the businesses across Scotland. But unfortunately, we have run out of time, so we'll have to save that for a later date. Thank you, Leon, for taking your time today, for filling us in on what's been happening in Scotland. We'll be launching a fortnightly podcast with Leon, which will look at what's happening in Scotland, what it will mean for businesses, and so on. So I do hope that those listening will tune in on Thursday, the 16th of September, when we launch that podcast. Leon, if there's anything you want to follow up on before we let you go.
Well, I think I would just say that I'm always keen to hear from members about the issues, the challenges that they're facing, or indeed even if they just want to make contact with me. If we haven't had a chance to speak yet, then I'm always available. So please do get in touch.
And if you are a UKH member and want to stay informed, keep an eye out on the UK Hospitality Scotland bulletins, where we provide members with details on the latest developments and things that will be important for your business. So for more information on how to become a member if you're not a member, or to hear more about your membership benefits, please email membership@ukhospitality.org.uk. And if you have any questions that have been discussed on the podcast today, or you have suggestions for the future podcast on the one we'll be launching on the 16th, do email info@ukhospitality.org.uk and just put podcast in the subject line, and we will have a look at that for you. Once again, thank you, Leon, for joining us today, and I hope listeners who are interested in hearing more will join us on the 16th. In the meantime, don't forget, as Leon mentioned, we do have a Twitter account. The handle is @UKH Scotland. Make sure you follow us on there, and you can also join our Facebook group, which is facebook.com/groups/hospitality Scotland, and join us there for future conversations. Thank you, Leon, and we'll speak to you next month.
That's great. Thank you very much.